Hey, welcome back to another video. This time we're talking the Kamen Rider Zero One comic again, and I'm not gonna mince words here, folks. This one is really bad. Like, amazingly so. I like to think I was overall pretty positive about the first two issues. The first one had a couple minor nitpicks, but I mostly enjoyed it. Despite the problems I had with the second issue, I was still pretty hopeful, but the third issue has completely destroyed any faith I have in this. It's terrible. And we don't even have to go farther than pretty much the very beginning to run into the first bits of issues. So we open more or less where the last one left off, although instead of being at the top of the Hidden Intelligence building and getting blown up, now Aruto and Izu are dropping back down into it, because I guess contacting Zeya was less of a priority, although now Aruto is the one doing it instead of Izu. Whatever was set up for Izu doing last issue at the end, and it just doesn't matter, I guess. Aruto calls down the Rising Hopper Cycle, which is not what that bike is called. A cursory Google search, literally, it would take you 5 seconds to search Kamen Rider Zero One bike, and you would find out this thing is called the Rise Hopper. Now, under normal circumstances, that's not that big a deal. It doesn't destroy the story for it to have the wrong name, but it's one of those really small details that's just kind of suspect when you get it wrong. It's like if somebody was writing a Batman comic and they called the Batmobile the Bat Car. Like, it may not destroy the story, but it's a small enough detail that you would think pretty much anybody writing an officially licensed story about this would get right. What follows is really just Aruto and Izu escaping the remaining Magia, although they just kind of assume that Ragnarok was destroyed by the explosion, even though they acknowledged last issue that the Ragnarok they were fighting in the Hidden Intelligence building was not the real one. They even literally straight up said Ragnarok is not actually here, and the one they were fighting was essentially some weird hard light thing being manipulated by the cluster cells that make up Ragnarok or whatever. It wasn't an explanation that really made any sense, and here they're just treating it like the real one. And if you think I'm just assuming, don't worry, there'll be confirmation for it later, and it's going to get really stupid. So they escape out of the building, they lose the bike, Fua and Yaiba show up to berate Aruto again for letting Hidden Intelligence get blown up like this. And it is at this point that I realized something very suspect about this series that hadn't really occurred to me before, and that's that nobody really seems to care that Ragnarok is trying to kill Aruto. They're more concerned about the damage that's being caused as a result of the fight, but they don't really seem that concerned that there is someone trying to murder him. So they lecture him for a little bit longer, and we cut back to inside the building, which is really just more of the lecture and them threatening to oust Aruto as president over the damage that he didn't cause and couldn't really do anything about. Then later, Izu is looking into the remains of the Magia, the ashes that were left behind, enough to fit in that one test tube. I am stressing that detail because it will be important here in a little bit that there is only that little bitty amount of Magia remains left, and it turns out they are giving off some kind of signal aimed right at Mount Fuji. They go there, find a thing glowing in the ground that is interacting with Aruto's driver belt. We'll set aside, I'm not entirely certain how he figured out it was interacting with it, because there's nothing really in the art that implies the belt is producing some kind of a reaction, and instead just focus on the fact that he says driver belt. This is another one of those things like the name of the bike that on its own isn't that big of a deal, but again, is a minor detail that I would think anybody familiar with Kamen Rider in general would be able to get right. And when I first saw it, I thought, okay, it's just an editing mistake. They wrote driver the first time, decided it should be belt, or the other way around, and just forgot to remove it the other time. But no, later we'll see that they say driver belt again, so no, they intended to call it driver belt, and that just tells me that there's not a whole lot of attention being paid to terminology here, but we'll get back to that in a second. This summons a lab to come rising out of the ground, and they interact with the AI within it that explains the Apocalypse reboot system. We cut over to Hirobi to remind us that he exists, and for no other reason, and here is when we get the actual origin of Ragnarok, is that he is some kind of failsafe program to be activated in the event of an extinction-level event to make sure that no defective or abnormal riders remain after the end of the world, to, I guess, to endanger the rest of humanity, so Ragnarok is supposed to make sure that humanity could safely rebuild if the end of the world were caused by a Kamen Rider, like what was attempting to be done in Zero One's movie. But as far as I can tell from continuity, that hasn't happened yet. I don't really know why they would assume that is a thing that might happen, but whatever. I don't know what they've used to determine Aruto is defective or abnormal, but that's not even really important, because suddenly the Magia remains reversed their inert state, whatever that is supposed to mean, and the tiny little amount of ashes that remain are enough to reconstitute 4 entire Magia, because that's how mass works. And Aruto goes, if they're not dead, then that means Ragnarok might not be destroyed. No shit. It's almost like the one that you blew up wasn't the real one. You know, that thing Izu said last issue. There's then a, 3-panel fight between the Magia before Ragnarok shows up again, and he starts giving his evil monologue about how he followed them and allowed them to defeat him so they could discover this, and he couldn't activate the lab because it would consider him a redundant program, but for unexplained reasons, Aruto's driver belt was read as legitimate and let him get in here, and he's able to obtain the 1000 key, the ultimate progress key that allows him to access all the powers of the Kamen Riders, which is a pretty broad statement. I imagine maybe it's sort of like it uses all the progress keys sort of thing, but who cares about explanations for what things are or why it exists? Like, who made this? Why is it here? You could really say that about this whole lab, honestly. The AI within the lab says the Ark is going to attempt to shut him down, but Ragnarok has achieved full sentience. He doesn't answer to the Ark anymore. He's not destroying Kamen Riders because of a system glitch. He's doing it because he wants to. Why does he want to? Because the Kool-Aid Man is red. It feels kind of like that bit in Build when Evolt gains emotions, and he decides he's going to keep destroying planets because he thinks it's fun. Except this is stupid, and Ragnarok is nowhere near as interesting or even in any way engaging as a villain as Evolt was. After a frankly comically small amount of effort, Izu was able to grab the 1000 key away from Ragnarok. It's kind of the equivalent of going, hey, look over here, while Izu grabs it. And while Ragnarok is off trying to get the key back from Izu, Aruto is able to grab a branch and stab Ragnarok with it because he had no built-in defense against organic objects, which really just makes it sound like any random regular person could have walked up to Ragnarok and punched him in the face and beat the absolute hell out of him and he wouldn't have been able to do anything about it. Great way to keep your villain really menacing. They then start, like idiots, just talking above him about what to do with him and how they need to get him near a magnetic power source to end this once and for all. Which, again, as a reminder, that only worked last issue because it wasn't the real one. The magnet thing that destabilized him only worked because he was a hard light projection and not the real thing. But, you know, who needs to remember plot points or anything? But while they're standing around talking like idiots, Ragnarok is just able to yoink the key out of Aruto's hand, and the issue ends as he uses it to transform into Ragnarok Supreme. So yeah, this one is a complete and total mess. It has forgotten plot points from the last issue, as though the writer wasn't paying attention to their own book. This is the kind of stuff I expect from series that were written by multiple people, not one guy. It doesn't get terminology correct, like really, really basic terminology, like the bike and the belt, calling it the driver belt. And all of that kind of adds up into a realization I had that you probably are already aware of thanks to my thumbnail for this, and that's that Titan does not care about Kamen Rider. They very clearly do not care about this license. Between how sloppy this comic and this issue in particular are, and how absolutely appalling their Kamen Rider Kuga manga translation is, it is painfully obvious that they grabbed this license not because they really wanted to do anything with it, but because they saw that people were clamoring for Kamen Rider over here and wanted to cash in on it. And no other reason. They did not care about delivering a quality product, and that much is very obvious. And it seems pretty much the same thing with the writer of this series, Brandon Easton. He says that he watched the whole show, and I don't believe him. But if he did, he clearly was not paying very close attention because he didn't get character personalities right. He doesn't seem to know even where this is supposed to take place. and he doesn't get very basic, easy terms right. I do not mean this as an attack on Brandon Easton in particular. I have never met the guy. I don't know if he's the nicest person you'll ever meet or a complete dick. But from a creative standpoint, when writing this Kamen Rider comic, it is very clear that he does not know what he is doing, and either when he says on Twitter that he has seen the entire show, he is either lying or he just was not paying much attention to it, like I said. The artwork for the issue is largely about the same as it has been for the entire series. It's passable. There's nothing really all that wonky this time around. No weird poses or strange ass shots of Valkyrie, mostly because she's not in this issue for more than a couple of panels. Same thing with Fua. There is this really weird, like oddly feminine Magia that's out of place and very strange, but it's pretty whatever. There is also, and I think this is a weird thing, I don't know what this is about. Throughout most of the artwork, outside of the 2-page spreads, there is this line across the page. And it is only on the artwork because it doesn't overlap the text balloons and it doesn't overlap sound effects. So I'm guessing it was probably some kind of issue with the raw artwork that was submitted before the lettering was done and was never fixed, or nobody noticed, or any other reason that really adds up to more of Titan not really caring about this license in any way. So to end this video off, I'm going to say something I don't usually like to say in stuff like this. Don't buy these. Don't buy the 01 comic from Titan. Definitely do not buy the Kuga manga. These do not deserve your money. If you're planning on reading them in any other way, don't. Don't waste your time on it. I advise that you spend your time and money on something better, like, say, IDW's Sonic comic if you're into that, or if you want Toku-related or Toku-adjacent stuff, read Radiant Black, or even frickin' Boom's Power Rangers comics. For as much as I don't like those, at least they're made by a team that seems to care about the property that they are working with. Titan very obviously does not. They have proven this with the absolute travesty that was their Kuga manga translation, and they've proven it here with this 01 comic series. So don't buy these. I will be a little hypocritical and say that I am still going to pick up the 4th issue for the sake of finishing it and talking about it on here, but in this definite case, do what I say, not what I do. Buying these is a bad move. Don't do it. Read something else, spend your money and time on a product that is more deserving of it for a team that actually respects your time and your money worth delivering a quality product, unlike this. Links to stuff in the description. It's not worth going on the whole spiel. The rest of this video is more important than that. That's all for now, and I will see you guys next time with hopefully something much, much better than this.